So today I'm going to try and cover most of the NQ cameras. I'm going to try and cover most in the one video because a lot of the NQ cameras are Canons. And the good thing about Canons are, once you know how to work one, they are all relatively similar. So in front of me here I have the T2i, also known as the 550D. I have the T3, also known as the 1100D, and I have the T7, also known as the 2000D. Unfortunately, I do not have a T5i or a T5 with me currently. So as you may already be able to tell, there's a bit of weirdness with the names. When you call it the Rebel series, these are the United States names. So Rebel T2i, Rebel T3. You also get a Rebel T5 and a Rebel T5i, Rebel T7. The UK names are 550D, 700D, 80D, things like that. I will put up a little spreadsheet now to compare the names of the cameras that I'm talking about today. So yeah, I'm going to discuss these cameras in the one video solely because they are so similar. Once you get a look at the back of them, you'll see how similar they are. And again, as I say, once you know how to work one, you kind of know how to work them all. So this will do you in good stead once you progress up, and you'll be able to use things like the 6D, the 80D, things like that. It's also pretty good just for basic camera handling knowledge, because the layout of a Canon camera is quite traditional with most modern DSLR cameras. So let's get into it, shall we? Right, so first of all, let me show you the backs of all these cameras, and quite soon you will see that they're all fairly identical. So this is the 2000 compared with the T3. I'm going to keep the 2000 up. I'm going to compare that with the T2i. So if you pause and actually have a quick look, you will see that they all have the same buttons. It's just that they're in different order. They're in a different position. So the cameras are quite identical. So for my demonstration, I'm going to use this 2000D just because this is a more recent model, whereas these guys are starting to get a little bit obsolete. But again, if you have a quick look, you'll see that they all have the same type of buttons. They're all just in a different area. If you look on top as well, they're quite similar, quite identical. But anyway, set these aside. I'm going to work with the 2000D. I'm going to start from the front and work my way back. This is your lens, okay? To adjust the zoom on the lens, you move the big bar. That'll adjust how close up or how far away your shot is. If you want to adjust the focus, make sure this AF and MF, that stands for autofocus, manual focus, make sure that's set to manual, and you turn the little ring at the front. Do not try and move this while autofocus is on. That's how you ruin your lens. I'm going to keep it in autofocus for now. This bit here is your button that most people know about a camera. This is how to take your shot. No, this isn't how you start recording footage. This is only to take a photograph. It's a 2-press button, half press and a full press. Once the camera's on, if you half press this, the camera will try and focus, and once it's focused, it will bleep. That's with a half press. Once the camera is bleeped, then you can do a full press to take a shot. The camera will not take a shot until it is bleeped if it is on manual, if it's on automatic focus. So I'm pressing that fully down, and it isn't taking a shot until it can focus. So, that's your button to take photos. This guy here, I'm going to get into in a little bit because this is quite important. We'll hold back on that now. This button here is your flash. All you have to do is press it when the camera's on. All you have to do is press it and your flash pops up. This guy here is your on-off, as you can see. It's just a little switch. Turn it on and off. This guy here is like a preset dial. So, as you can see, if I rotate all this, you've got all these different settings. The main ones that you need to focus about is the very last one here, which is the film setting. And these four here at the opposite end. These four here are going to be your main uses when using photography. The main use should be your manual mode, the M, the very end. But if we go into program, the camera tells you what all these different things do as you rotate this dial. So what program does is that the camera does everything for you. It adjusts the shutter speed and it adjusts the aperture. TV mode, or shutter speed mode, or shutter speed priority, means that you can adjust the shutter speed and the camera will work out the aperture for you. AV mode, or aperture priority, means that you control the aperture and the camera controls the shutter speed. Manual mode is where you yourself operate the shutter speed and aperture. The camera does not help you out with this one. This is the mode that I recommend you to use, simply because it will get you fairly acquainted quickly on how to operate the camera. Alright, so moving on. If you are looking at an image and you would want to zoom in or zoom out, you use these guys here. If you want to change your display, press this guy here. So that'll bring up the display on the camera. It's just hard to see because of the lighting, but I can now see what I'm shooting at because I pressed that. Press that again to turn it back off. So I'm back again in post because there's a little important bit of detail that I forgot to mention. So if your dial on the top is turned to video, remember that I said earlier that the shoot button isn't the button that you use to take a video, that only takes a screenshot. So if you want to start recording footage, this button here, the button with the red dot right next to it that changes your display, that is the button that you want to press. This guy here I'm going to get into at the very end because you use this along with this scroll, but we'll get into that in a minute. This display button turns the display off. So if you turn your camera on and you do not see a display, before you think the battery's dead, press the display button. See if it turns it on. Again, you can see displays here on this camera. It might be slightly different in this camera. Displays up here. So just look for the buttons. They're there. This button here controls your ISO. If you press it, you can adjust it. I've got it in auto now because this camera is fresh out the box, so it's not been set up. This is your autofocus button. This is your white balance button, where you can adjust your white balance. This is your continuous shot button, where you can do a single shot, continuous shot, or timed shot. This button down here is your playback. I've not got a camera in the machine, but if you took photos and you like to look at them, that's your playback. This guy here is your menu. This is where you can change your settings, format your card, so on. If you want to format your card, it is in the very first toolbar box. You just move left and right to move there, and it's the third row down on this camera. This Q button here, this allows you to move about inside this menu to adjust little things. Alright. a lot of these settings that you can adjust using this Q button, you can actually adjust quicker using using all these buttons here. So that's the auto white balance. That's showing you the auto white balance settings, flash exposure. So yeah, mess around with that and see what all this does. Right, let's get into this little AV button and this scroll here. When you're doing photography and filming, it is important that you get very familiar with using these two buttons on Canon cameras, because if you just move the scroll, not doing anything else, just move that scroll, you will see here, that's your shutter speed. It quickly adjusts your shutter speed. So that's excellent. You don't always need to press Q to then scroll up to then adjust your shutter speed, so that's excellent. But what if you want to control your f-stop as well? What if you want that slight more bokeh effect? Well, all you do is you press this AV, you press and hold it. Notice when I toggle this, the selector goes from shutter speed to aperture. So if you press and hold that and use that scroll again, now I'm manually controlling the aperture quite quickly. So you can see how slight adjustments can be made on the fly with relative speed as you're shooting. Again, I recommend that you take these cameras out and get really familiar with doing that. So I guess that's really it for the quick demonstration on this camera. The other thing to note as well, if you've got bad eyesight and when you look through this viewfinder it seems a little bit brilliant. If you look through this viewfinder and it seems a little blurry, you could adjust this little panel up here. This adjusts the focus in here. You can always tell where it should be reset as there's a notch that's a bit bolder than the rest. That is your standard reset if you bring that up to the center lines. The last thing I want to talk about is that this camera doesn't only focus on the center. You can actually dictate where the camera is going to focus. If you press and hold this button here, the plus zoom button, you can see that we've got a little selection here called automatic selection. This is where your camera focuses, so that's telling me that the camera is automatically focusing wherever it can see. If you press this button and scroll at the same time, it will change these little dots, and this is determining where the camera is going to focus. If you want a shot being focused on the right and a bit more bokeh to the left, then you leave it there. The camera will then automatically try and focus to that destination. So that's good if you're wanting to try and manually operate the f-stop and shutter speed, but you don't quite have the speed to also operate manual focus. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this quick introduction to these cameras. Again, this goes kind of across the board, the Canon range. If you have a look at the higher end cameras, there is slight differences, but as you can see just with these three examples, the buttons just may be in different areas. So just take your time and look at the camera, don't just panic. So I hope this video has helped out, and I know in my intro I did say it'll be 5-minute tutorials. I think they'll actually be extended to maybe about 10 minutes. So yeah, I do apologise for taking up so much of your time, but I hope it's been useful for you. So thank you very much, and next I'll be going into the Sonys and the Panasonic Lumix, so that the NQs can get a full head start for their course.